Hello, this is plot summary of Oliver Twist, a Victorian novel by Charles Dickens. Oliver Twist was written in a serial form between 1837 till 1839. It's Charles Dickens' second novel. It has many autobiographical elements. The plot centers around the character of the child protagonist, Oliver Twist, who is born into a life of poverty and misfortune or bad luck. As he came to life, finding himself in a workhouse in the fictional town of Matfog. By fictional, we mean it's not a real town. We don't have a real town by that name. This fictional town is located 70 miles north of London in the world of the novel. Oliver Twist is orphaned by his father's mysterious absence. So he is missing both his mother and father because his father is absent or not present in a strange manner, while his mother, Agnes, died in his childbirth, so that Oliver is taken into the world of the workhouse, and the dying mother was robbed of her gold name locket. Oliver is meagerly provided, which means he receives a very little amount of food and protection for under the terms or according to the conditions of the poor law. And he spends his first 9 years of his life living at a baby farm, which ironical name, satirizing the animal condition in which the children are raised up under the care of a woman called Mrs. Mann. Of course, the name itself is ironic or satiric because she is as harsh as a man. Oliver is brought up with little food and few comforts. Around the time of Oliver's 9th birthday, Mr. Bumble, the parish beadle, شماس الإبريشية, removes Oliver from the baby farm, or means takes Oliver out of the baby farm and put him to work picking and weaving oakum at the main workhouse. Oliver, who toils, which means works very hard, with very little food, remains in the workhouse for 6 months. One day, the desperately hungry boys decide to draw lots, يعملوا قرعة, to try their fortune. The loser in this fortune game must ask for another portion or another part or more food. This task falls to Oliver himself, who at the next meal comes forward, trembling or feeling panic and hesitation, bowl in hand, and begs or please Mr. Bumble for gruel, مغرفة, with his famous request, please sir, I want some more. Of course, Mr. Bumble is shocked to hear this request. Although he gives the young children very little amount of foods, but he assumes they are grateful. He thinks that Oliver is a kind of rebellious or rebel boy who will excites a kind of rebellion among other children. That's why he charges Oliver, punishes him, and raises his case to the board. That's why a great uproar or great anger and shouting ensues or results. The board of well-fed gentlemen or rich gentlemen who administer or run the workhouse hypocritically offer £5 to any person wishing to take the boy as an apprentice. Why? In order to prevent any possible rebellion among the remaining children. Mr. Gamfield, a brutal or a cruel chimney sweep, claims Oliver or comes to demand that Oliver can come to work with him as a chimney sweeper. However, Oliver doesn't like this idea because he knows quite well that chimney sweeping is the job of death. That's why Oliver begs despairingly not to be sent away with that dreadful man. A kindly magistrate refuses to sign in the indenture, or one of the judges, one of the philosophers, one of those who run, one of the members of the board finds it okay and refuses the offer of Mr. Gamfield. Later on, another man comes to claim Oliver or to take Oliver as an apprentice. Mr. Sowerberry, who is an undertaker, Hanuti, employed by the parish, takes Oliver into his service. He treats Oliver better than the treatment of the members of the workhouse, particularly because the boy's sorrowful countenance or features, ملامح وجهه, uses him as a mourner, شخص ناعي, يعني واحد يمشي يولول at children's funerals. Mr. Sowerberry is in unhappy marriage because his wife is domineering wife. His wife looks down on Oliver and misses few opportunities to underfeed and mistreats him. Mrs. Sowerberry offers Oliver the remaining meal from her dog. He also suffers torment or punishment at the hands of Noah Claypole, an offish and bullying fellow apprentice and charity boy, who is quite jealous of Oliver's promotion to Mute and Charlotte, the Sowerberry's maidservant, who is in love with Noah. wanting to bait Oliver or to annoy Oliver or to intrigue Oliver. Noah insults the memory of Oliver's biological mother, calling her regular write down bad on, which means a bad woman. Of course, Oliver becomes very angry, so that Oliver assaults or attacks Noah and even gets the better of the much bigger boy. Although Noah is bigger and older than Oliver, but Oliver can beat him. However, Mrs. Sowerberry takes Noah's side because she dislikes Oliver and helps him to subdue, punch, and beat Oliver, and later compels her husband or forces her husband or asks her husband and Mr. Bumble, who has been sent for the aftermath of the fight, to beat Oliver again or strikes Oliver. Once Oliver is sent to his room for the night, he breaks down. He collapses and weeps, cries. The next day, Oliver escapes or runs from the Sowerberry's house and later decides to run away or elope or escape to London to seek a better life. Nearing London, Oliver encounters or meets Jack Dawkins, a pickpocket, Nashal, more commonly known by the nickname the Artful Dodger, and his sidekick, دراعه اليمين, a boy of humorous nature named Charlie Bates. But Oliver's innocence and trusting nature fail to see any dishonesty in their actions. The Dodger provides Oliver with a free meal and tells him of a gentleman in London who will give him lodging or a house for nothing, يعني without any return, and never ask for a change, never ask for any service. Grateful for the unexpected assistance, Oliver becomes very grateful and happy for this help, which comes unexpectedly. Oliver follows the Dodger to the old gentleman's residence or house. In this way, Oliver unwittingly falls with an famous or someone with very bad reputation, Jewish criminal known as Fagin, the gentleman of whom the Artful Dodger spoke. But till this moment, Oliver doesn't know the real nature and job of this man. Ensnared or falls in the trap, وقع في الفخ, Oliver lives with Fagin and his gang, عصابة of juvenile pickpockets من الحرامية الشباب in their lair at Saffron Hill for some time, unaware, which means he does not recognize their criminal occupations. He believes they make wallets and handkerchiefs. Soon Oliver naively or innocently goes out to make handkerchiefs with the Artful Dodger and Charlie Bates, only to learn that the real mission or real job is to pick pockets. The Dodger and Charlie steal the handkerchief of an old gentleman named Mr. Brownlow and flee or escape or run away. When he finds his handkerchief missing, Mr. Brownlow turns round. Seeing Oliver running away in fright or in terror, and pursues him, thinking he was the thief. Others, other people walking down the street or other passers-by join the chase. انضموا في المطاردة. Capture Oliver. They catch Oliver and bring him before the magistrate. Curiously, بفضول, Mr. Brownlow has second thoughts about the boy. He seems reluctant, which means displeased, مشمئز, متضايق, to believe that he is a pickpocket. Mr. Brownlow believes that Oliver is too innocent to be a thief. To the judge's evident disappointment, a bookstall holder who saw the Dodger commit the crime clears Oliver, who by now actually ill, faints in the courtroom. يبقى the seller of the books witnesses in the court of law that Oliver is not a thief and the real thief is the Dodger, so that Oliver collapses. Mr. Brownlow takes Oliver home and, along with his housekeeper, Mrs. Bedwin, cares for him. Oliver stays with Mr. Brownlow and he recovers or resumes his health rapidly or swiftly and blossoms from the unaccustomed kindness or the good nature of Mr. Brownlow. His bliss or happiness is interrupted or ended when Fagin, the leader of the gang of thieves, fearing Oliver might tell the police about the criminal gang, so that Fagin decides that Oliver must be brought back to his hideout, المخبأ بتاعهم. When Mr. Brownlow sends Oliver out to pay for some books, one of the gang, a young girl named Nancy, whom Oliver had previously met at Fagin's, accosts him with the help from her abusive lover, the robber Bill Sykes, and Oliver is quickly bundled back to Fagin's lair, which means that two members of the gang, Nancy and Bill Sykes, follow Oliver, and on his way to the bookshop, they kidnap him. The thieves take the £5 note Mr. Brownlow had entrusted to him and strip him of his fine new clothes. يعني they take out Oliver's new clothes. Oliver, shocked, flees, escapes, and attempts or tries to call for the police assistance, but is dragged back by the artful Dodger, Charlie, and Fagin. Nancy alone is sympathetic towards Oliver. Nancy alone feels pity with Oliver and saves him from beatings by Fagin and Sykes. In a renewed attempt to draw Oliver into the life of crime, Fagin forces him to participate in a burglary or a kind of robbery of a house. Nancy reluctantly or unwillingly assists or helps in recruiting him, in subduing him, all the while assuring the boy that she will help him if she can. Sykes, after threatening to kill him if he doesn't cooperate, if he doesn't help them, puts Oliver through a small window and orders him to unlock the front door in order to be able to enter the house in order to steal it. The robbery goes wrong, and Oliver is shot by people in the house and wounded in his left arm. After being abandoned or left by Sykes, the wounded Oliver makes it back to the house and ends up under the care of the people he was supposed to rob or steal, Miss Rose and her guardian, Mrs. Maylie. Guardian means not her mother, but one of her relatives or acquaintances who is responsible for raising her up. This is Fagin, the Jew, the leader of the gang, and Charles Dickens, on purpose, presents him in a stereotypical, ugly manner, representing the hatred towards the Jew or the anti-Semite attitude. The mysterious man, Monks, a strange man. No one till now knows who is Monks. Monks plots with Fagin or makes schemes or plans, evil plans with Fagin to destroy Oliver's reputation, to make Oliver appears a bad boy. Monks denounces Fagin's failure to turn Oliver into a criminal. Monk's targets in life is to turn Oliver into a criminal. And the two of them agree on a plan to make sure he doesn't find out about his past. Monks is apparently related to Oliver in some way. Back in Oliver's hometown, Mr. Bumble has married Mrs. Corney, the matron of the workhouse, where the story first began, only to find himself in an unhappy marriage, constantly arguing with his domineering wife. Domineering wife means a wife who has a stronger character than her husband and wants to be obeyed all the time. After one such argument, Mr. Bumble walks to a pub where he meets Monks, who questions him about Oliver. Bumble informs or tells Monks that he knows someone who can give Monks more information for a price, and later Monks meets secretly with the Bumbles. After Mrs. Bumble tells Monks all she knows for a price, Monks takes the locket and ring, proving Oliver's parents, which had once belonged to Oliver's mother, and drops them into the river flowing under his place. Monks relates these events to Fagin, unaware that Nancy is eavesdropping or hearing them on their conversation, and plans to inform Oliver's benefactors or those who help Oliver or provide for Oliver. Mr. Brownlow returns to London, where Oliver sees him and brings him to meet the Maylies. Now ashamed of her role in Oliver's kidnapping and worried for the boy's safety, Nancy goes to Rose Maylie, staying in London. She knows that Monks and Fagin are plotting to get their hands on the boy again, and offers to meet again any Sunday night on London Bridge. Rose tells Mr. Brownlow, and the two then make plans with all their party in London. The first Sunday night, Nancy tries to leave for her walk, but Psyche refuses permission when she declines to state exactly where she is going. Nancy refuses to tell about her destination. Fagin realizes that Nancy is up to something, or she is about to make something against the wish of the gang. Perhaps has a new boyfriend and resolves or decides to find out what her secret is. Meanwhile, or at the same time, Noah has fallen out with the undertaker, Mr. Sowerberry, stolen money from him, and fled or escaped to London with Charlotte. Using the name Maurice Bolter, he joins Fagin's gang for protection and becomes a practicer for the kitchen lay or robbing of children. And Charlotte is put with the girls. Fagin sends Noah to watch the Artful Dodger on trial after he is caught with a stolen silver snuff box. The Dodger is convicted or sentenced while showing his style, with a punishment of transportation to Australia. He will leave his country and will be deported to or taken out to Australia or exiled to Australia. Next, Noah is sent by Fagin to spy on Nancy or to get more information about Nancy and discovers her meeting with Rose and Mr. Brownlow on the bridge. Hearing their discussion of why she didn't appear the prior week or the previous week and how to save Oliver from Fagin and the monks. Fagin angrily passes the information on to Sykes, twisting the story to make it sound as if Nancy had informed on him or had told about their secrets when she hadn't, but in fact she hadn't. Believing Nancy to be a traitor, خائنة, Sykes beats her to death in a fit of rage, نوبة هياج أو غضب, that very night and flees or escapes to the countryside, الريف, to escape from the police and his conscience, ضميره. There, هناك, Sykes is haunted or chased by visions of Nancy or ghosts of Nancy, and alarmed by news of her murder spreading across the countryside. He returns to London to find a hiding place and intends to steal money from Fagin and flee to France or escape to France, only to die by accidentally hanging himself while attempting to lower himself from a rooftop to flee from a mob angry at Nancy's murder. Mob means a group of working class people. While Sykes is fleeing the mob or escaping from the crowds of people, Mr. Brownlow forces monks to listen to the story connecting him. Once called Edward Leaford and Oliver as half-brothers, or to face the police for his crimes. Their father, Edwin Leaford, was once friends with Brownlow. Edwin had fallen in love with Oliver's mother, Agnes, after Edwin and the monk's mother had separated. Edwin had to help a dying friend in Rome and then died there himself, leaving Agnes his guilty love in England. Mr. Brownlow has a picture of Agnes and had begun making inquiries when he noticed a marked resemblance or similarity between her and Oliver. Monks had haunted his brother to destroy him, to gain all in their father's will, الوصية. Meeting with Monks and the Bumbles in Oliver's native town, Brownlow asks Oliver to give half his inheritance, نص التركة, نص الورث, to Monks, to give him a second chance, لإعطائه فرصة أخرى. Oliver is more than happy to comply, to agree. Monks moves to the New World or America, where he squanders his money, reverts to crime, and dies in prison. Fagin is arrested, tried, and condemned to the gallows, حبل المشنقة. On the eve or the night of Fagin's hanging, Oliver, accompanied by Mr. Brownlow in an emotional scene, visits Fagin in Newgate prison in hope for retrieving papers from Monks. Fagin is lost in a world of his own fear of impending death or approaching death. On a happier note, Rose Maylie is the long-lost sister of Agnes, and thus she turns out to be Oliver's aunt. She marries her sweetheart, Harry Maylie, who gives up his political ambition to become a parson or a member of the churchmen, drawing all their friends to settle near them. Oliver lives happily with Mr. Brownlow, who adopts him. So Brownlow becomes a foster father or a surrogate father for Oliver. Noah becomes a paid semi-professional police informer. The Bumbles lose their positions and are reduced to poverty, ending up in the workhouse themselves. Charlie Bates, horrified by Sykes' murder of Nancy, becomes an honest citizen, moves to the countryside, and eventually or finally becomes prosperous. The novel ends with the tombstone of Oliver's mother, on which it's written only one name, Agnes. And this is the end of our novel, the plot summary. Thanks for watching and goodbye.